got two more speakers here. Tim Heng is getting mic'd up. See, 4-time Excel MVP, 15 years of experience developing and reviewing financial models. He's done commentary for the Financial Modeling World Cup Finals. All right. He is on his way. All right, selector. Tim Heng from Australia. All right. Right side up.
Thank you. Alrighty. So, left my notes on my chair, so I'm going to do this on the fly. Thank you everyone for coming. We're going to try and keep this relatively quick because I know we're very far behind schedule. So we'll carry on and see how we go. My name is Tim Heng. Some of you were here yesterday at the Financial Modeling Masterclass. Can I see you in the audience? Yeah, thank you. Thank you for coming back. So, some of you know me already. For those who don't, Oz has just introduced me. Thank you. But you can find me at all these places. So, what are we here to do? We're talking about financial modeling. But we're not talking about financial modeling in Excel. Not anymore. Talking about financial modeling in Power BI. I know this is an Excel conference. I know this is sacrilegious to talk about Power BI sometimes. But there was a really great question at the masterclass yesterday. Someone asked, what do I think about the different tools that exist for financial modeling? Because we do financial modeling in Excel most of the time. We have our time series, we have our calculations, we have financial statements. But there are other tools that exist as well. So, Power BI, it has different characteristics to Excel. For those people who need to do ad hoc calculations, Excel is great. But if you're going to productionize something, Power BI is fantastic. You have dimensions, you've got the ability to drill down, drill up, all these things that you can't do in Excel. But to set the scene, let's talk about what we mean by financial modeling. We're talking about financial statements, developing income statement, cash flow statement, balance sheet, doing it in a way that it's all linked, that you have checks and balances to make sure that it's working correctly. And for those who were here yesterday, you saw we had a very simple process. So simple that there's 100 words on the page. But it all boils down to this one idea, this control account idea. If you can build your model into a structure that has this sort of control account, you have one control account for every item on the balance sheet, an opening balance, closing balance, things that move in between. So, something like receivables. You've got revenue. That increases how much people owe to you. You've got cash receipts. That reduces how much people owe to you. With this simple control account, we built an entire financial model in Excel. The question is, how do we do it in Power BI? Because this is a lot more complicated. In Excel, it's pretty simple. In Excel, we have this control account. We have an opening balance. The opening balance feeds, whoops, that was not what I meant to press. The opening balance comes from the previous closing balance. And then as I follow that through, I get this corkscrew account, this control account structure. Now, in Excel, this makes sense. Each cell feeds on to the next cell, and you go. In Power BI, you can't do this. In Power BI, you think each one of these lines, receivables, revenue, cash receipts, all of these items need to be a measure. For those of you who attended Gashpa's masterclass, you know what measures are. You're all DAX ninjas by now, right? But measures. You can't build measures like this. Measures have to be calculated for the entire line all at once. You can't have a measure that feeds down and across and down and across and down. That corkscrew account that we use traditionally in our control accounts doesn't work. So we need to find a new way of doing it. And this brings us to this idea of using cumulative balances instead. Something so that we don't have a control account that goes across, something that just goes straight down, we can calculate across the line. Okay? This is what we're going to be doing in Power BI. We're going to be building something that allows us to have a full set of financial statements. We're going to have our income statement, our cash flow, our balance sheet, all of the checks in place. But with the ability to not only just see the numbers that we see on the page, because, in Excel, we can do this. I've got an income statement here. I've got a balance sheet. I've got a cash flow statement. What's the big deal? Why do I need Power BI to do this? Well, Power BI lets us drill in. Power BI lets us use our tools or our calendars, allows us to go down one level in the hierarchy. So we're looking at our P&L by day instead of by month. It allows us to drill back up, going back up to month, going back up to quarter, look at things annually. We can do this with a couple of clicks of our button. Imagine you have a P&L, and you're reporting for your whole company, and you say, okay, what about this business unit? So I go to my slicer, and I say, okay, let's take a look at this business unit. Here's my P&L, here's my cash flow, here's my balance sheet for this product, or this business unit, or this department. That's what Power BI is here for. And this is why we want to try and do this in Power BI instead. Okay? Now, it's not actually that complicated in Power BI. This is something I prepared earlier, but let's look at something that we can do together, right? There's only a short time for this demo, so we'll try and be relatively quick as we go. What we have here is a series of data. We're importing data from a series of actuals from our accounts. And what we're going to do is create a couple of parameters that we want to use. Consider that we start off with a set of sales that we might have. When we're looking at sales, if we want to convert that to our cash receipts, the amount that we actually receive in our bank, we might send out an invoice, we receive that back 45 days later, 60 days later, whatever it might be. So in Power Query, or the Power Query side of Power BI, we're going to create a parameter. I'm going to create a simple parameter here for the we'll put a P in front to say that it's a parameter, and our days receivable. This is going to be a number. It's going to have a value. Oops, no, didn't mean to do that. Cancel that. Let's create a new parameter. P days receivable. Would help if I could spell. Okay, this will be a number. It'll have a value to start off with of, say, 45 days. Okay, where's my mouse? There we go. So I've got this parameter that we're going to put in the parameters section. We're going to make sure that we load this into Power BI because we want to be able to use this measure, or use this number in our measures. Okay, P, days receivable. I'm going to create one more parameter because in our data set, we've got something that tracks sales. And so we need to identify the parameter for our sales code. And this sales code is going to be a text code with a value of 1,000. So you think you have an accounting system, you export this data. It doesn't always come in numbers, right? Sometimes it comes in text. We need to make sure that we match the value that's coming in with the value that we're feeding in to look for this figure. Again, I'm going to enable load, pop that into my parameters. Okay. So those are our parameters. Close and apply. These will now become available to my measures. Excellent. Okay. So what we want to do is create a simple visualization, something that looks more or less like this control account that we built before. Okay? So we want to try and build something like this. We'll start off. We'll create a simple measure for our sales. So what's our measure going to be? Sales. Is that big enough? That's good? Okay. Sales, we're going to calculate our sales. Everyone knows the calculate function. Actually, who uses DAX here? Who knows how to use DAX? Lots of people know how to use DAX. For all you people who don't know how to use DAX, that's fine. Look up all of these MVPs around the front, except for Charles. I don't think you do anything on DAX. All of these MVPs have something on DAX and Power BI and Power Pivot and so on. There are great resources that you can find on how to teach yourself these skills. This is not terribly complicated, trust me. So We're going to calculate the sum of our amounts. So calculate our amount, close brackets, and we're going to do this when the account code equals 1,000. Oh, I'm not going to type in 1,000. I'm going to refer to the sales code, which, why is that not coming up? Capital P. This is why I don't like doing things live. That should be my P sales code over here, this figure. This is why I prepped a whole bunch of notes beforehand, and I'm not good at DAX. This is Faraz, can you pass me my phone quickly? Just down there. Keep typing it out. Yeah, maybe that's it. Let's try P sales code. There we go. Try that. Let's build a matrix. I'm just going to create this matrix visual. We're going to drag that sales figure into the values section. We're going to take a calendar. We've got a date hierarchy that I'll put across the columns, not the rows. So I've got my dates along the top. I have my values and my values for my sales. That's calculating well. Okay. If I want, I can drill this down and I can see my sales going by year, by quarter, by month. This is what I'm looking for. Excellent. Okay. So, second measure. I've got this line in my control account, essentially. Now I want to work out what are my cash receipts. How much am I receiving for these invoices that I'm sending out? So I come back to Power BI. I create a new measure. This new measure, sales cash receipts. Now, this uses a slightly more complicated calculate function. So calculate. And we're going to calculate our sales. So we're starting off with our sales as a starting point. But sales coming in means we increase how much people owe us. Cash receipts means that we decrease how much people owe us. So it's going to be negative. Negative sales. And so which sale are we receiving? We're not receiving the sale for the invoice we sent out today. We're receiving the invoice for, or the sales that we sent out 45 days ago, based on that parameter. So it's not just calculate sales. We're going to calculate based on a function called date add. Now, date add lets us point to our calendar table. So we can say, let's look at our calendar table. We're going to not just take today's date, but we're going to look backwards. We're going to look backwards 45 days. But we're not going to hard code the 45. We're going to refer to the parameter that we created, p_days receivable. Is that it? I shouldn't need to refer to all of that, should I? There we go. So close date add, close calculate. Maybe I can space this out to make it a little bit neater to see what I'm doing. Okay? So sales, looking at the dates, moving it minus 45 days back, but we then need to specify minus 45 what? I said 45 days, so we'll put this to be day at the end. 45 days, 45 years, that's how long it feels sometimes that people pay us, right? 45 years. Okay, let's pop this in, we'll lock this measure in, and I'll add this to my table. Okay, now, this matrix right now doesn't look very much like a control account at the moment. You're going to need to rearrange this a little bit to get it to work. So luckily, I've got this lovely format visual section, which allows me to change the way this looks. So the first thing I'm going to do is get all of these measures and put them down the rows instead. So under values, sorry? Nope, no one's talking to me, that's fine. Under values, I'm going to switch values to rows to put them down the left-hand side instead. So I can see, okay, now I'm starting to layer this up. And I can see my sales come in. I've got 599 sales in the first period. Let me see if I can zoom this in a little bit. It's too far. That's all right. 599 in the first period. And 45 days later, I start to receive that cash in February. Okay? So I probably get about half a month's worth of cash receipts in February. Good. Looks like it's doing the job. Now, a couple of other things I might want to do to play around with this a bit more, though. There's lots of I don't like totals in between my sections, because totals break up the flow. I'd rather see everything going from start to the end. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to remove some of these row totals. So let's get rid of the row column subtotals. Yep, get rid of those, get rid of the row subtotals. And so now I have a time series just like I have in Excel. Excellent. Now, one thing that I know, or at least in Australia, I don't know what it's like here in Bulgaria, but when you're an accountant or when you work in a finance team, you like numbers, right? Finance people like numbers. Now, when you have negative numbers, finance people don't like dashes for some reason. They like brackets around numbers. So we might need to change some of the formatting of this. So what I can do is go to the model section. I can find my cash receipts. And if I look at my number format down here, I might want to create a custom number format. Except that's not helping me right now. If I switch it to a decimal number, okay, and then switch to a custom number format, there we go. This is giving me the ability to start playing around with what format I want to use. So, who knows how to do number formatting in Excel? Lots of people. Okay, so you might recognize this style. So to get the number format right, we're going to use hash, comma, hash, hash, 0.00. So what we're going to have is all of any numbers greater than one digit are optional, but we're going to have comma separators here, and then we will display 2 decimal places every time. Semicolon, those are positive numbers only. Now I said negative numbers, we want to use brackets, right? So we'll put brackets around it. Bracket, hash, comma, hash, hash, 0.00. All right, close bracket. And for zeros, what I'm going to do is put in a dash. Okay, so there's my custom number format that I'm going to use. And this will turn all of my negative numbers into numbers with brackets. Now, if you use Excel and you use number formatting in Excel, you probably know, or you may not know, that you can use square bracket and add a color to your number formatting in Excel. Now, that doesn't work in Power BI, unfortunately. So to get this to work in Power BI, to make it red, negative numbers in red, that's a common thing that we like to see in finance. What we can do is point to specific cell elements. We can come down to the sales cash receipts section, and then maybe specify a rule for our font color. Okay, so by default, it's going to turn our negative numbers blue. Who wants to see our negative numbers in blue? Anybody? No, okay. We want our negative numbers red. So I'm going to change the format style to use the rules. And we're going to say if the number is greater than 0%, that's the bottom number you can get. And if it's less than 0, then we're going to make this red. Okay, there we go. This looks more like what we'd get out of a finance team, yeah? So we've got sales, we've got cash receipts. Now, traditionally, what we do in the control account, we'd have an opening balance, closing balance, and then that's that corkscrew problem that we had before, right? Where's my Excel page? This is the corkscrew, and now I can't get this to work in Power BI, because when you have a DAX measure, my DAX measure in January can't feed a different DAX measure in February that feeds this DAX measure in February. Like, I can't get that corkscrew to go. So instead, we're going to need to create these cumulative numbers. So I'm going to need cumulative sales. I'm going to need cumulative cash receipts in order to calculate my result. Now, how am I going to get this to work? Is this actually working correctly? That should be, if these numbers are to be believed, yep, that's right, that's better. Okay, we need the cumulative sales, cumulative cash receipts. So I'm going to create 2 more measures now. The first is going to be my sales that are cumulative. So let's expand this out again. Let's take a look. Sales cumulative. Now, to work out our cumulative sales, we're going to start again with that calculate function. We're going to start counting up our sales. And then to add to this, what our filter is going to be, it's going to be based on the calendar date. So we want to include all the dates, not just the dates of the period that we're in this matrix visual, right? So we're trying to break out of the filter context. We want to use all dates. So all of our dates, but only where the date is less than or equal to whatever the date in our filter context is. So calendar date is less than or equal to our max, our calendar date. So we're taking our sales, we're filtering it so that we're looking at all of the historical dates, which is effectively our cumulative sales over time. Okay? Now, if I were to grab that cumulative sales and put that into my visual, hopefully you can see sales cumulative. Takes the January figure, adds that to the February figure, adds that to the March figure, and so on. Okay? Now, that's not something that goes in the control account. This is one of our little hidden measures we're just going to keep aside. We're not going to touch that one. But that's our sales cumulative. Same principle applies. We're going to copy that and create a new measure for our cash receipts cumulative. So instead of sales, little sales receipts cumulative, and instead of sales, we're going to use the sales cash receipts. Same formula. Okay? So that gets us the cumulative numbers, which we can use to work out our opening and closing balance. Okay. Now, when we're working on a control account, thinking back to how this is going to work in DAX, in a control account, one item is generally the balancing total. That's how you make sure that your balance sheet's always going to work. So your cash receipt, or your revenue plus your cash receipts plus whatever was outstanding last month, yesterday, whatever you want to call it. Add all that together, that brings you your closing balance. So if we think of this, what we're effectively going to need to do is create a measure for our opening balance. And then we'll add that to our cumulative revenue and cash receipts to work out how much we have in our closing. So we're going to calculate our opening receivables. New measure. Sales, opening receivables. So this is something that's actually going to go in our control account when we're ready to go. This is going to be based on, again, calculate. It's going to be based on our cumulative sales. So cumulative sales plus sales from our cumulative cash receipts. So we've got cumulative sales, cumulative cash receipts. Now, if we think about what an opening balance is, when I come to February or when I come to March, I don't just want to sum up all the cumulative numbers to that point, right? I want to get the cumulative numbers up to yesterday's number. So if I'm looking at March, the opening balance for March is the closing balance of the last day in February. So we're going to use another DAX measure, previous day. Previous day based on the calendar date. So what's the cumulative total of our sales and our cash receipts? Yesterday. Okay. So there's our opening receivables. I can bring this over into my control account. And finally, one last measure, something that totals this all up. So our sales, closing receivables equals All those three measures, right? Our sales opening, plus our sales, plus our sale, oh, sorry, not sales, our sales cumulative, No, sales, plus our sales cash receipts. Here we are. I'll add this to my control account. And hopefully, we can see this is now a proper control account. I've got an opening balance, I've got a closing balance, I've got all the movements in between, and it works. It's a control account. It's one that I can drill in and out of, which is the whole point of being able to do this in Power BI, right? I can drill down, I can look at this on a daily basis. I can drill back up, I can look at it on a quarterly basis. If I have slices in place, I can modify this and look at it by a particular product type, a particular business unit, a department, and so on. But here's one of the problems with Power BI. It still looks ugly. Now, that's not something you normally accuse Power BI of doing, right? Power BI is supposed to be sexy, it's supposed to be nice, it's supposed to wow people with how good it looks. But it's just a matrix. How do you make a matrix look good? So, when you have a table like this, I've got a total at the bottom. Usually you want something like a line to say, okay, something here, let's go back to Excel. We've got this beautiful line that says, okay, I've got this number, and that number, and that number, and here's our total. How do I know it's a total? Because there's a line there, and that tells you that all the stuff above adds into the bottom. How do I get that line here? Damn. Okay, so there are some hacks that you can do, though. Let me show you how to create a line in Power BI. I'm going to create a measure. This measure, I'm just going to call asterisk. Doesn't matter what you call it. But this measure is going to be equal to space. Just space. Not blank, space. Okay? This is a very important distinction. When I add this to my values, you'll see it adds a very tiny line between my cash receipts and my closing receivables. Okay, that's useful, because then I can go and find that, and what I can do is, let me see if I can find the settings for this. Let's go to the values. No, that's not what I want. I want to find specific cells. Here we go. So let's go to our star. That is not actually what I wanted. Why can I never find all the settings that I want? Specific column. Okay, there we go. Star. And I want the background color to be black. And what that's effectively going to do is give us that black line between the main part of our control account and the total. Has anyone built totals in Power BI? It's really hard to do this. But you just create a dummy measure, and you pop it in place, and that gives you the answer. I can take that and apply that to the header item as well. So I can apply that black line across from the labels all the way through the numbers. And now I have a beautiful control account. Fantastic. All right. In the interest of time, here's something I prepared earlier. So, where was I hoping to get to if I had a full allotment of time? Well, one more control account, cost of goods sold. Cost of goods sold here is linked out to a gross margin figure. Now, people think in Power BI that it's really great for reporting, it's great for actuals, but it's not so good for forecasting and making predictions. But here, what we're doing is we're using our sales figure and applying this gross margin on the left-hand side to calculate what our COGS would be. We're effectively providing a predictive forecast in some respects. And as I change my gross margin from 40% to 60%, I can see my COGS numbers update. I change it to 80%, COGS numbers update. And so I'm using essentially a disconnected table Most people talk about setting up data models and creating relationships. Here, this is a table with no relationships. All we're using it for is to identify a margin that I can use as a variable or a parameter in my COGS calculations. So I now have this gross margin that I can use in my matrices. And then you keep doing this. And as I told the people in the financial modeling masterclass, you just keep building and building and building, and eventually you get to the point where you've got all of your financial statements, because everything comes down to the control account. If you can build a good control account, it doesn't matter how complicated your revenue or your CapEx calculations are, it comes down to the control account. Revenue goes onto the income statement. Cash goes onto the cash flow statement. And the receivable goes onto your balance sheet. And that's how you end up with beautiful matrices like this that are essentially our full P&Ls. And if you're wondering, how do I get this blank line in between? Well, that's just a simple, where is it? A simple extra field here, one measure that is the blank. We said that to get the line, you want to use a measure that has a space. To get the blank line, you want to measure with just double inverted quotes. Let me find that measure for you. Let's go to Fields, Control Account Measures. That's this one over here, double quotes. Nothing special. But you know what? It's pretty. It works, does our job. We now have our financial statements. We can drill in, we can drill out, we can use all the features that Power BI brings us. And, we don't even need to rely on Excel all the time, right? I love Excel. I'm an Excel MVP. I hate the idea of sort of putting Excel behind and saying, here's this really cool thing that Power BI can do. But use the right tool for the right job. And if you need to drill down, if you need to cut things by dimensions and use slices to drill in and drill out, Power BI is the way to go. And to be honest, this is the future of where your financial statement reporting is going to go. So, with all of this, how can you learn more about how to actually do this? First of all, you want to learn more from those folks at the front of the room, like I said, all of their DAX tutes and whatnot. We've got information on our own website that you can use. My colleague, Liam Bastick, who some of you may have known from previous versions of Excel Days, Liam's written a book about how to do financial modeling in Power BI. So check that out. You can try and find it. And that's really about it. If anyone has any questions, happy to take them, but otherwise, we're on a tight schedule, so thank you very much, everyone.